Hello and welcome to episode 8 of this tiny barn build series. Now in the last video I managed to finish off this retaining wall and pour this hearth for the chimney breast, which is going to become the feature which will house these gas bottles. Now I've spent some time on the computer designing this chimney breast, and today I'm going to be turning this into what you see here, or at least starting to. So I'm armed with my sketch, so I know exactly what I need to be doing today. Let's get started. So I need this to be 1544 millimeters above the hearth. So I'm putting myself a couple of marks here at 1544. And screw this batten in place, and that way I can support this in position, resting it on that ledge. So I don't need to hold the weight of this while I get the screws in. Get it lined up. Right, just pop a screw in the middle to keep it in position. And then being careful not to move it, pop the screws in from behind, because that way they'll be stronger. So now when I get this into position, I can just drop it behind the concrete. I can rest that on the edge of the concrete hearth, and then it'll be self-supportive while I get some screws in. Now you can see how that piece of timber screwed onto the shutter is ledging it onto this, which means I don't need to support the weight, but also it's ensuring it's at the right height at the top and it's level. And once I've got it fixed in place, I'll remove that batten. Now in the same way that I held these formers in place for the retaining wall pour, I'm drilling into the concrete with a masonry bit and then inserting a concrete screw. Well, it's a steel screw, but it's designed to bite into the concrete. And you can see here that I'm leaving the screws just a little bit loose. Now I'm doing that so that I can form this corner to be perfectly plumb, vertical. It gives me a little bit of flexibility of movement to plumb up the corner, screw the two pieces together, and then I can go back and tighten up those screws into the concrete foundation. They're not light. Way. I bought all of these forms second hand. They'd been used twice before by a builder, and I've used them for the retaining wall, for the lower part of this chimney breast, this part I'm building now, and of course the top or capping of the chimney breast as well. So this video is going to be the last time you see these formers in use, because they really are starting to deteriorate and won't last another project. Now I think it's worth taking a little time out from the build just to explain what it is I'm trying to achieve here and why. I've got these two LPG gas bottles and they need somewhere to be stored. And I want that to be something that looks good, and that's why I came up with this idea of using a decorative chimney breast. Now if I strip away the brickwork, the stained glass window and the panelling, you can see the concrete structure that's going to be formed in this video here. Now the idea is that from the carport, tiny barn, shed side, it's going to appear like an outdoor fireplace, a relic of an old building with a couple of wine barrels in there. But if we take a look from the other side, it's going to appear like a window in an upper story of a building. Now that window will be fixed open to provide the necessary ventilation for the LPG gas bottles. Well, it's true to say that I've done a lot of steel reinforcement recently, so I'm going to save you the details and get straight into bending and installing these pieces. So I'm just marking out the perimeter here of an opening that's going to be a window. That's why this reinforcement steel doesn't go all the way across this panel. I'm going to frame this out and then sandwich that framing between the two forms, and that way concrete won't enter into this area. Now I want the bottom of this opening or doorway to be in a line with this hearth. And this hearth is going to be trimmed out with the brick and tile on top. So I'm going to take a measurement from this. You can see it's a very uneven natural slate tile. It's got varying thicknesses. So I'm going to come up with an average, and that way I can form this to the correct height. Now it's important that that isn't too high, because of this area housing LPG gas bottles. The gas is lighter than air, so if there were to be a leak, it needs to be able to flow out through this open window. Right, so I'll take a measurement here. We're looking at around about 110 millimeters.
Then I can transfer all the measurements onto the formwork, giving me an outline for the window. Because of the shape of the fireplace, the last pieces of steel to go in are actually angled. So I've drawn myself a template onto the tarpaulin here, and I'm using that as a guide to ensure that I bend the steel to the right angle. Perfect.
There we are, the last piece of steel work in. Right, now I can box in the front here, frame out for that window, and then pour that concrete.
I know, I said that was the last piece of steel. But then I remembered that there's a beam to go across the top here, joining the two side wings together. So I've made up these loops, I'm just going to get those installed, and then I can finish up the formwork.
Gotcha.
I've finished fitting all the pieces of wood I need to frame up this window or door opening, and I want the screws to come in from the opposite side through the 18mm thick 3/4 inch plywood and into the much thicker wood. But of course I can't hold it in position on this side and be on the other side to put the screws in. So I'm going to line them up with my marks on this side, tack them with a screw temporarily, then I can go round to the other side and put some good fixings in to hold it in place. And you may notice that this piece of wood doesn't come all the way down to my mark, and that is by design. I have realised that if I put a piece of timber in that is captivated by the concrete at both ends, there is no way I'm getting that piece of timber out without damaging the concrete. So by keeping it short and having the next piece butt up against the underside of that, it means that each of these 4 pieces will only be captivated on one end by the concrete. You can see the issue I've got here in this bottom corner. I've got a slight gap between the two, even though the two timbers are actually fixed to the formwork, and perhaps more importantly, this one is twisted, and you can see here just by how much. Simple fix, of course. Drive the screw in on an angle, and it should hold them together and remove that twist. And there we go. And looking around the other side, you can see those screws I've just put in protruding from the formwork all the way around and all the way up there. All I need to do now is put some screws in from this side, parallel and aligned, and that will pull it nice and tight. Now, this wall thickness needs to be 150 mils, 6 inches, so this piece of timber alone isn't enough to bridge the gap between the two forms. So I do need to laminate it with another piece. This one I can screw through the face because it'll be easy to remove when I demold. And that's the boxing finished off for the window. Now I can just consult my sketch again to make sure I'm on track and getting everything in the right place, and begin putting the inner formwork in place. Then adding some bracing at the top to make sure that the two faces remain parallel and the correct distance apart, and of course ensuring that they're plumb as well. And then I can just finish off with this formwork, just blanking off these two ends. The wings are at a lower level than the back edge here, and that's so I've got room to form the archway which will become the fireplace. This formwork needs to have holes in it for this rebar to protrude, but of course I need to be able to remove that formwork afterwards. So I'm going to make that panel up, need to do the same on the other end, a little bit of angle bracing, and ready to mix some concrete. Okay, so here's my plan for this corner. You can see I've got these pieces pre-cut, notched around the rebar, and the offcuts I'll nail back in position like so. That will give me a complete dam for the concrete,
there are some small holes around the reinforcement bar, and a small amount of concrete is going to come through those, but that's okay. I'll deal with that as and when. They can be screwed in position here to stop them moving forwards, and on this end I'm going to screw this backing down here in place to stop them pushing forwards. Down here. Now there we go. I think I'm just going to put some strong backs along this long back edge here just to stop any potential for bowing. A couple of diagonal braces and we're ready. Okay, I'm almost ready to get the concrete mixed and poured, but there's one more precaution I want to take to make sure that this formwork doesn't blow out. I'm just going to throw a ratchet strap around there and tie it all together. Right, now clearly that won't keep things dead straight. That's what this strong back is for. There's a bit of flex in this, and this could still move out some distance before this actually has a huge effect. But what it will do is stop that perimeter growing. And I'm hoping that when the concrete goes in and that balances itself out, this actually has some benefit. It is just an extra insurance policy on top of the insurance policy, on top of the bolts that are holding it all together. Time will tell if this is going to hold.
Now I find it quite strange doing formwork. This is the first project where I've used formwork to create concrete structures, and you spend so much time and energy putting the formwork together, cutting it to size, bolting it together, bracing it, making sure it's perfectly accurate, only to tear it all down after the concrete goes in. So this is the best part of the job, where you're actually mixing the concrete that's going to form the structure that you're trying to create. I'm using a 3-in-1 mix of concrete here, so 3 parts sand builder's mix rubble aggregate to 1 part cement. Now that's super strong, 25 MPa strength, which is about 3,600 psi. Now I'm going for the super strong concrete because of the seismic zone that I live in. In all honesty, if I was building this, say, back in England, I would have built the entire structure out of brick. There wouldn't be a concrete structure inside, there wouldn't be steel reinforcement. I'd just build it out of clay brick. But in this country, you need to be really aware of how frequent and how potentially severe earthquakes can be. So the structure has to be able to withstand that. The bricks on their own, hold together with just mortar, they wouldn't hold up to a strong earthquake. And with the cavity all filled up with concrete and adequately vibrated to ensure there's no air bubbles in there, I can remove the excess, smooth off the top, and then give it a day or two before I can demold.
Right, I think I'm going to take these off the other side, and then I can hammer this off from the opposite side. Easy.
The eagle-eyed amongst you will notice I didn't put any form release on any of these timbers, so they are a little bit more difficult to remove than they ought to be. Now, I'm not concerned about the surface finish of the final pour, because all of this is going to get covered over with brick, skin, timber or render in various places. All I need is a strong structure of the right shape. But with a little bit of wrestling, I managed to get all of the timber formwork out and then just wet the surface down to help slow the curing process a little bit.
Okay, good. I've spent about 2.5 hours on this model, just rebuilding this corner brick by brick, getting it to exactly how I want it to be. My bonding is good, I've got minimal cuts, and I've sketched out each of my first 3 courses. Now the first course is for the hearth, so that's quite unique, but then course 2 and course 3 are just going to repeat, alternate courses. I haven't quite got the curve right yet. I'm happy with the top, and I'm happy with this part. I'm not very happy with this corbel. I think I'm going to have to spend a bit of time. I want that to just come out a little bit further and bring this set of brickwork down a little bit more, but that won't alter this pattern that I've got going on here. And I still haven't worked on the rest of the chimney breast. I'm still not sure what that's going to look like. I've played around with a few ideas, nothing that's quite right yet. I'll give that some time. So I spent a little bit of time just laying out this first course of bricks and then marking the concrete hearth so I know exactly where to place them. What's important here is that the front of this is dead straight and it's parallel to the building, and its centre line is in line with the structure that's going to be above, so that as I build the chimney breast and ultimately the chimney stack up to the peak of the roof, it actually hits the peak of the roof and not off to one side, left or right. So I've marked my centre line of the hearth here in relation to the building, not taking the measurements from this because this could have some small inaccuracies. So I'm going to lay my 2 end bricks first, and that way I can establish a string line to keep this front course straight, and I can make sure that it's offset to the right amount. I've got a mix on, and I'll grab that over and get started.
So I've started by setting the brick on a bed of mortar and then ensuring it's level in both planes. And then, because of the shortness of my spirit level, I've decided to put the centre brick in next, and that way I can make sure that this course of brick is perfectly level.
Now I'm pretty sure that one's set in too far, but let's get a string line up and see. Now I don't have any blocks, any brick blocks.
So what I'm going to do is trap the string line against the top arris of the brick and then pull it taut. Now the only thing I've got to hand here is some paper. Now this isn't ideal. As soon as it gets moist or damp, it's going to tear. But I've only got to have this in place for, 5 or 10 minutes at most, and so I'm risking it, and it should be fine.
And my overhang here is 10 millimeters. And this concrete just dips in a little bit, so I can't take a measurement from there. I'm going to have to take it from here, and that is 10 millimeters. And you can see we've got the string line supported by its trapped piece of paper here and there, in line with those arises, and it's not quite in line with this one. I know that's in the right place. I've measured, I know that one's in the right place. I've got to move that one forwards as predicted. Just tension that line a little bit.
And once I know the string line's in place and it's nice and taut, I can go ahead and run in the rest of this course. And I decided to run a couple of courses on the side of these wings just to get me started on the final brickwork of the chimney breast, and then fill in the hearth area ready for the slate tiles.
And to finish off the hearth, I've managed to pick up these recycled slate tiles, 300mm square, beautiful riven surface. You can see how uneven that is. Now they're all different thicknesses. If you take a look at the back of this one, you can see just how thin this is on the edge here. So this is going to be used perhaps as an infill piece. I want the edges to be quite thick. So rather like this one here, again it's very riven on the surface, but has much better thickness to it. I want to see the front edge, I want to see some thickness to that. If you take a look at the surface again, it's quite uneven, really natural, and it actually has this iridescent shine, almost metallic look to it in the sun. It really is a beautiful material to use.
I am wearing ear protection, but I'm not wearing any face mask, and that's a mistake. It is a windy day and you can see the dust is being carried away quite quickly, but still it's not good enough. I should be wearing a mask here. Now, the good news, in the next video, I'm going to be trialing out the Basecamp dust mask with active carbon filters to see just how good it is, and more importantly for me, just how comfortable it is to wear over a period of time whilst wearing glasses.
Now where I'm standing is of course the hearth to the fireplace, which is going to house these gas bottles, and it's going to be under a cover, and so there's very little chance of this area ever seeing any water. However, I am going to be washing cars around in this area. No doubt I'll be hosing this down occasionally, and I don't want any water migrating through the slate, through the brick, and through that 250mm thick roof or ceiling to the shop window below. The chances are absolutely minuscopic, but it could happen. And so a little bit of insurance policy, I'm putting some of this 25 micron vapor barrier down on a bed of mortar. So it'll be mortar, vapor barrier, mortar, tile. And that way it's just going to have a little bit more chance of moisture running away. This will be pitched forward slightly anyway, so it all should drain down and flow through into the drainage channel. So let's see if that mix is ready and get this laid before the wind blows it away. And that's looking pretty close, nice and creamy, breaking off the backs of the blades quite nicely, not sticking to the drum. I think that is ready. We'll get it on centre first, double check.
Now, the uneven surface of these riven-faced slate tiles makes them very difficult to get level, but I'm just using the level to make sure that they're in line with each other, and I'm going for the line of best fit. Importantly, I'm making sure that the gap in between those tiles is even, is accurate. And of course that the front edge is dead straight.
Well, now those tiles are in and they're starting to harden up, I've taken some time to measure up the framework I need to build, which is going to segregate this window, which will be visible from the garden side, from the gas bottle enclosure, which will be visible from this side. I've got my cutting list. I'm going to head over to the recycled materials area and see if I've got enough material to make this framework up. Right, so back at the pile of materials that I'm recycling from all of the shutter and formwork and bracing, and this is the stuff I need to use. Now this is H3 Hazard Class 3 treated, so it's good for outdoor. It's 50 by 100 rough stone finish, and I bought this new, so I know it's recently treated. It's got 50 years minimum of lifespan left in it. Right, I need a few pieces of this. Let's see if I can accumulate enough to make this frame.
And for a quick test fit, just to make sure it's the right size, but I have decided not to install this just yet. I think it's going to get in the way of all the formwork I need for the capping or the top part of this chimney breast, which I'll put in very, very shortly in this video. But I just want to make sure it fits and it's going to work and give access to that hole in the hearth, which is where the gas pipe is going to be installed at some point in the near future.
Oh, there it goes again.
And having the camera fall over again seems like a good opportunity to take a break from this project for a while whilst I worked on the set for the Addams Family. Now if you haven't seen that video, it might not be your cup of tea, but give it a little look. There might be something in there that you enjoy.
Well, after weeks, no, months away from the tiny barn build, I am finally back on this project and I'm so glad and excited to be doing this. Now, in my time away whilst I worked on the Addams Family set, the weeds really have taken over. So I'm going to spend the rest of today just clearing the job site, reclaiming the project so I can get back into the build. Now, you really don't want to be watching me weed, so whilst I get on with this, why don't you have a quick look at the footage from yesterday when I took that set apart.
Now it's fair to say that the top of this chimney breast is a little bit complicated, so my drawing became really important whilst putting the formwork together for this one. The front edge is angled back about 15 degrees and the sides nearly 50. And of course there's the arched former to make as well. Now to construct the curve, I've used a string line measured to the correct radius and just pulling that taut with my pencil to give me the curve I need. Now a jigsaw would be the ideal tool in order to cut this curve, but my jigsaw's kind of buried deep in a pile in the middle of the shipping container, which is 100 meters down the drive. And so I've set the depth on the circular saw to a shallow cut, and I'll make a couple of passes to get it to the full depth. I'm using 3 of these arch formers, and that way the thin slats which I'm going to be lining these with don't have much of a span, so these will give it a lot of strength. I'm also choosing to put some blocks in between the formers. Now honestly, I don't think these were necessary, they weren't needed, but it did stop things moving around potentially when the first couple of concrete loads went in. Right, well I think that's quite strong enough. I'm going to put some extra insurance in place by putting some vertical struts in here just to give extra support to these battens, and maybe one down the centre as well. But first off, I'm going to use these thin 18-19mm thick 3/4 inch pieces of 40-45mm wide, and I'm going to cut these and just line this. Now I'm not going to be fixing these onto these arches because I need to be able to remove this easily once the concrete is formed. They're just going to sit there in place and be trapped by the formwork that's going to be on the face here. And the last piece had to be cut to width so it was a nice tight fit. And there we have the arch all formed. As you saw on the drawing earlier, the 2 sides taper in at about 49-50 degrees. So I've marked out on the backboard exactly where I want those formers to be, so I can go ahead and fix the remaining forms in place using those marks as a guide. I may not look it, but this piece really is heavy. Too heavy for me to lift into position accurately, hold it and put the screws in. So I've put 1 screw in one corner, just tacking it roughly in position. Then I can raise the other side, get that exactly where I need it to, and then make the final adjustments necessary to get it exactly where I need it. And before I put the final few pieces of formwork in place, I need to finish up the steelwork. Now first off, I need to shorten these pieces from the previous pour, and then I can begin constructing the cage which is going to transfer the loads from the chimney stack down into these side wings. Now with the steel work, I'm generally working on 150mm centres, 6 inches. And to help me make sure that the steel is in the right place, not too close to the outside edge of the concrete, I'm just going to temporarily fix in place one of these side wings, and that'll ensure that the angle is right. And with the cage completed, I can get the starter bars in place, which are ultimately going to go up the centre of the chimney stack. Now when I come to build the chimney stack, it will be clay brick. However, it'll also have a steel reinforced concrete liner, again to help prevent collapse in the event of an earthquake.
Done.
And ready for concrete. Now, what I'm really pleased about is that this is the last piece of formwork I need to do on this project. It means I can get rid of the formers. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not that I think formwork is bad, it's just really time consuming. And if possible, I would use concrete blocks in the future for walls and only use formwork where necessary. For example, in this fireplace where there's an arch and tapered sides, formwork is the right choice. Well, I was hoping to get all this concrete in before the rain hit. Unfortunately, not the case, but I'm going to keep going. There's only a very small opening in the top of this formwork, and so the fact that it's raining won't be such a problem because not much rain will get at the concrete.
One more mix, I think. Which is good, because I've only got one more mix worth left in the trailer.
Right, well, it's been a couple of days since I poured the concrete into this formwork, and it's rained ever since. Well, until now. We've got a light shower at the moment. I've maybe got an hour before another heavy downpour, so I'm going to try and get this formwork off. Risky. Nice. Look how crisp that edge is. Right, the archway. I mean, I should do the back first, but that means getting down in the mud. So I think I'm going to do the archway. You should come and have a closer look. Yeah, gotcha. Actually got me. And you can see here just how hard it would have been to remove these slats had I fixed them, screwed or nailed to those arched forms. Keeping them separate just means I can take them off individually, as you see here. Now there's a little bit of a dry corner here, as you can see, where I probably didn't vibrate the concrete right down into those edges as much as I should have. But I'm not concerned. Overall, it looks really good, in fact better than I'd imagined. And I can't wait to get started on that decorative brickwork next.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.